evening, everyone. Look, I did my hair. I hope you're all well. Welcome to another reading of 1001 Nights. My name is Saman Giraud and I'll be your host this evening. For those of you who are new to our little online readings, please don't worry, you don't have to catch up on every single night that we read, because the frame story of the 1001 Nights is a story within a story within a story, so you can tune in at any given time. Didn't cut off my finger, don't worry. Tonight's gonna be a long night. You see, I usually have issues with my hair. I don't do my hair often. I need someone to do that for you. So tonight's story, sorry, got distracted. So tonight's story is a long one, so make sure you have some water, some snacks, some tea, whatever makes you feel good. Let me just get seated. Oh, and if you are new also, my cat sometimes makes strange noises, sometimes uses the loo, so forgive me in advance. I usually try not to get distracted. Trying my best. All right, so if you're ready, let's start. Now when it was the 141st night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the wounded rider spake thus to Kanmakan. Then came out the same Kardash and fell on the old woman and her man and bore down upon them, bashing them. Nor was it long before they bound her and the 10 slaves and bore off their captives and the horse, rejoicing. When I saw this, I said to myself, my pains were in vain, nor did I attain my gain. However, I waited to see how the affair would fare, and when the old woman found herself in bonds, she wept and said to the captain Kardash, O thou doughty champion and furious knight, what wilt thou do with an old woman and slaves, now that thou hast thy will of the horse? And she beguiled him with soft words, and she sware that she would send him horses and cattle till he released her and her slaves. Then he went away, he and his comrades, and I followed them till they reached this country. And I watched them till at last I found an opportunity of stealing the horse, whereupon I mounted him and, drawing a whip from my wallet, struck him with it. When the robbers heard this, they came out on me and surrounded me on all sides and shot arrows and cast spears at me, whilst I stuck fast on his back, and he fended me with hoofs and forehand, till at last he bolted out with me from amongst them, like unerring shaft or shooting star. But in the stress and stour I got sundry grievous wounds and sore, and since that time I have passed on his back 3 days without tasting food or sleeping aught, so that my strength is down broad, and the world is become to me as naught. But thou hast dealt kindly with me, and hast shown ruth on me, and I see the naked stark, and sorrow hath set on thee its mark, yet are signs of wealth and gentle breeding manifest on thee. So tell me, what and whence art thou, and whither art thou bound? Answered the prince, my name is Kanmakan, son of Zau al-Makan, son of King Omar bin al-Numan. When my father died and an orphan lot was my fate, a base man seized the throne and became king over small and great. Then he told him all his past from first to last, and the horse thief said to him, for he pitied him, by Allah, thou art one of high degree and exceeding nobility, and thou shalt surely attain a state sublime, and become the first cavalier of thy time. If thou can lift me on horseback and mount thee behind me, and bring me to my own land, thou shalt have honor in this world, and a reward on the day of band calling to band. For I have no strength left to steady myself, and if this be my last day, the steed is thine alway, for thou art worthier of him than any other. Quoth Kanmakan, By Allah, if I could carry thee on my shoulders or share my days with thee, I would do this deed without this steed. For I am of a breed that loveth to do the good and to succour those in need. And one kindly action in Almighty Allah's honour averteth 70 calamities from its doer. So make ready to set out and put thy trust in the subtle, the all-wise. And he would have lifted him onto the horse and fared forward, trusting in Allah, aider of those who seek aid. But the horse thief said, "Wait for me a while." Then he closed his eyes and, opening his hands, said, "I testify that there is no God but thee, God, and I testify that Muhammad is the apostle of God." And he added, "O glorious one, pardon me my mortal sin, for none can pardon mortal sin save the immortal." And he made ready for death and recited these couplets: I have wronged mankind and have ranged like wind over the world, and in wine cups my life has passed. I've swum torrent course to bear off the horse, and my guiles high places on plain have cast. Much I've tried to win, and over much my sin, and catul of my winnings is most and last. I had hoped of this steed to gain wish and need, but vain was the end of this journey vast. I have stolen through life, and my death and strife was doomed by the Lord who doth all forecast. And I've toiled these toils to their fatal end, for an orphan, a pauper's son's kith or friend. And when he had finished his verses, he closed his eyes and opened his mouth. Then, with a single death rattling, he left this world. Thereupon Kanmakan rose and dug a grave and laid him in it in the dust, after which he went up to the steed and kissed him and wiped his face and joyed with exceeding joy, saying, "None hath the fellow of this stallion, no, not even King Sasan." Such was the case with Kanmakan. But as regards King Sasan, presently news came to him that the Vizier Dandan had thrown off his allegiance, and with him half the army, who swore that they would have no king but Kanmakan. And the minister had bound the troops by a solemn covenant, and had gone with them to the islands of India, and to Berber land, and to African land, where he had levied armies from far and near, like unto the swollen sea, for fear, and none could tell the host's van from its rear. And the minister was resolved to make for Baghdad, and take the kingdom in ward, and slay every soul who dare retard, having sworn not to return the sword of war to its sheath, till he had made Kanmakan king. When this news came to Sasan, he was drowned in the sea of Pore, knowing that the whole state had turned against him, great and small, and his trouble redoubled, and his care became despair. So he opened his treasuries and distributed his monies among his officers, and he prayed for Kanmakan's return, that he might draw his heart to him with fair usage and bounty, and make him commander of those troops which ceased not being faithful to him. So might he quench the sparks ere they became a flame. Now when the news of this reached Kanmakan by the merchants, he returned in haste to Baghdad on the back of the foresaid stallion. And as King Sasan sat perplexed upon his throne, he heard of the coming of Kanmakan. Whereupon he dispatched all the troops and headmen of the city to meet him. So all who were in Baghdad fared forth and met the prince, and escorted him to the palace, and kissed the thresholds, whilst the damsels and the eunuchs went in to his mother and gave her the fair tidings of his return. She came to him and kissed him between the eyes, but he said to her, "O mother mine, Let me go to my uncle King Sasan, who hath overwhelmed me with weal and boon." And while he so did, all the palace people and headmen marvelled at the beauty of the stallion and said, "No king is like unto this man." So Kanmakan went in to King Sasan and saluted him as he rose to receive him, and kissing his hands and feet, offered him the horse as a present. The king greeted him, saying, "Welcome, and welcome to my son Kanmakan. By Allah, the world hath been straitened on me by reason of thine absence, but praised be Allah for thy safety." And Kanmakan called down blessings on him. Then the king looked at the stallion, Al-Katul hide, and knew him for the very horse he had seen in such and such a year, whilst beleaguering the cross-worshippers of Constantinople with Kanmakan's sire, Zau al-Makan. That time they slew his uncle Shah Khan. So he said to the prince, "If thy father could have come by this courser, he would have bought it with 1,000 blood horses. But now let the honor return to the honorable. We accept the steed and we give him back to thee as a gift, for to him thou hast more right than any white, being knightliest of knights." Then King Sasan bade bring forth for him dresses of honor, and led horses, and appointed to him the chief lodging in the palace, and showed him the utmost affection and honor, because he feared the issue of the Vizier Dandan's doings. At this, Kanmakan rejoiced, and shame and humiliation ceased from him. Then he went to his house, and going to his mother asked, "O my mother, how is it with the daughter of my uncle?" Answered she, "By Allah, O my son, my concern for thine absence hath distracted me from any other, even from thy beloved, especially as she was the cause of thy strangerhood and thy separation from me." Then he complained to her of his case, saying, "O my mother, go to her and speak with her. Haply she will vouchsafe me her sight to see, and dispel from me this despondency." Replied his mother, "Idle desires abase man's necks. So put away from thee this thought that can only vex. For I will not wend to her, nor go in to her with such message." Now when he heard his mother's words, he told her what said the horse thief concerning Zat al-Dawahi, how the old woman was then in their land purposing to make Baghdad, and added, "It was she who slew my uncle and my grandfather, and needs must I avenge them with man bow, that our reproach be wiped out." Then he left her and repaired to an old woman, a wicked, whorish, pernicious beldam by name Sadana, and complained to her of his case and of what he suffered for love of his cousin Kuzia Fakan, and begged her to go to her and win her favor for him. "I hear and I obey," answered the old hag, and leaving him betook herself to Kuzia Fakan's palace, that she might intercede with her in his behalf. Then she returned to him and said, "Of a truth Kuzia Fakan saluteth thee, and promiseth to visit thee this night about midnight." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 142nd night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the old woman came to Kanmakan and said, 'Of a truth, the daughter of thine uncle saluteth thee, and she will visit thee this night about midnight,' he rejoiced and sat down to await the fulfillment of his cousin's promise. But before the hour of night, she came to him wrapped in a veil of black silk, And she went in to him and aroused him from sleep, saying, "How canst thou pretend to love me, when thou art sleeping heart-free and in complete content?" So he awoke and said, "By Allah, O desire of my heart, I slept not, but in the hope that thine image might visit my dreams." Then she chid him with soft words and began versifying in these couplets. "Hadst thou been leal in love's loyalty, never hadst suffered sleep to seal those eyne. O thou who claimest lover loyalty, treading the lover's path of pain and pine. By Allah, O my cousin, never yet did eyes of lovers sleep such sleep in thine." Now when he heard his cousin's words, he was abashed before her and rose and excused himself. Then they embraced and complained to each other of the anguish of separation, and they ceased not thus till dawn broke and day dispersed itself over the horizon, when she rose, preparing to depart. Upon this, Kanmakan wept and sighed and began improvising these couplets. "O thou who deignest come at sorest sign, whose lips those teeth like necklaced pearls enshrine, I kissed him 1,000 times and clipped his waist, and spent the night with cheek to cheek, close lean, till to depart us twain came dawning day, like sword edge drawn from sheath in radiant line." And when he ended his poetry, Kuzia Fakan took leave of him and returned to her palace. Now certain of her damsels became aware of her secret, and one of these slave girls disclosed it to King Sasan, who went into Kuzia Fakan and drawing his sabre upon her would have slain her. But her mother Nuzhat al-Zaman entered and said to him, "By Allah, do her no harm. For if thou hurt her, the report will be noised among the folk, and thou shalt become a reproach amongst the kings of the age. Know thou that Kanmakan is no son of adultery, but a man of honor and nobility, who would not do aught that could shame him, and she was reared with him. So be not hasty, for verily the report is spread abroad among all the palace people and all the folk of Baghdad, how the Vizier Dandan hath levied armies from all countries and is on his way hither to make Kanmakan king." Quoth Sasan, "By Allah, needs must I cast him into such calamity that neither earth shall support him nor sky shall shadow him. I did but speak him fair and show him favour because of my lieges and my lords, lest they incline to him, but right soon shalt thou see what shall betide." Then he left her and went out to order the affairs of the realm. Such then was the case of King Sasan. But as regards Kanmakan, on the next day he came in to his mother and said, "O my mother, I am resolved to ride forth, a raiding and a looting, and I will cut the road of caravans, and lift horses and flocks, blacks and whites, and as soon as I have collected great store, and my case is bettered galore, I will demand my cousin Kuzia Fakan in marriage of my uncle Sasan." Replied she, "O my son, of a truth the goods of man are not ready to hand like a escaped camel. For on this side of them are sword strokes and lance lungings, and men that eat the wild beast and lay countries waste and chase lynxes and hunt lions." Quoth he, "Heaven forfend that I turn back from my resolve till I have won to my will." Then he dispatched the old woman to Kuzia Fakan to tell her that he was about to set out in quest of a marriage settlement befitting her, saying to the beldam, "Thou needs must pray her to send me an answer. I hear and I obey, said the old woman. And going forth, presently returned with Kuzia Fakan's reply, which was, she will come to thee at midnight. So he rode away till 1/2 of the night was past, when restlessness got hold on him. And before he was aware, she came in to him, saying, my life be thy ransom from wakefulness. And he sprang up to receive her, exclaiming, O desire of my heart, my life be thy redemption from all ills and evils. Then he acquainted her with his intent, and she wept. But he said, weep not, O daughter of my uncle, for I beseech him who decreed our separation to vouchsafe us reunion and fair understanding. Then Kanmakan, having fixed the day for departure, went in to his mother and took leave of her. After which came he down from his palace and threw the baldric of his sword over his shoulder and donned turban and face veil, and mounting his horse Al-Katul, and looking like the moon at its full, he threaded the streets of Baghdad till he reached the city gate. And behold, here he found Sabah bin Ramah coming out of town, and his comrades, seeing him, ran to his stirrup and saluted him. He returned his salutation, and Sabah asked him, O my brother, how camest thou by this good steed and this sword and clothes, whilst I up to present time have got nothing but my sword and target? Answered Kanmakan, the hunter returneth not but with quarry after the measure of his intention. A little after thy departure, fortune came to me. So now say, wilt thou go with me and work thine intent in my company, and journey with me in this desert? Replied Sabah, by the Lord of the Kaaba, from this time forth I will call thee naught but my Lord. Then he ran on before the horse with his sword hanging from his neck and his budget between his shoulder blades. And Kanmakan rode a little behind him, and they plunged into the desert for a space of 4 days, eating of the gazelles and drinking water of the springs. On the 5th day they drew near a high hill, at whose foot was a spring encampment and a deep running stream. And the knolls and hollows were filled with camels and cattle, and sheep and horses, and little children played about the pens and folds. When Kanmakan saw this, he rejoiced at the sight, and his breast was filled with delight. So he addressed himself to fight, that he might take the camels and the cattle, and said to Sabah, come, fall with us upon this loot, whose owners have left it unguarded here, and do we battle for it with near and far. Excuse me. So haply may fall to our lot of goods some share. Replied Sabah, O my lord, verily, they to whom these herds belong be many in number, and among them are doughty horsemen and fighting footmen. And if we venture lies in this daring do, we shall fall into danger great, and neither of us will return safe from this fate. But we shall both be cut off by fate, and leave our cousins desolate. Then Kanmakan laughed and knew that he was a coward, so he left him and rode down the rise, intent on repine with loud cries and chanting these couplets. Oh, a valiant race are the sons of Numfan, braves whose blades shred heads of the foeman clan. a tribe who, when tried in the tussle of war, taketh prowest stand in the battle van. In their tents, safe close, Gaberlunzie's eyne, nor his poverty's ugly features scan. And I for their aidance sue of him, who is King of kings, and made soul of man. Then he rushed upon the she-camels, like a he-camel in rut, and drove all before him, sheep and cattle, horses and dromedaries. Therewith the slaves ran at him with their blades so bright, and their lances so long. And at their head rode a Turkish horseman, who was indeed a stout champion, doughty in fray and in battle chance, and skilled to wield the nut-brown lance, and the blade with bright glance. He drove at Kanmakan, saying, Woe to thee! Knewest thou to whom these herds belong? Thou hadst not done this deed. Know that they are the goods of the band Grecian, the champions of the ocean, and the troop Circassian. And this troop containeth none but valiant wights, numbering 100 knights, who have cast off the legions of every sultan. But there hath been stolen from them a noble stallion, and they say vowed not to return hence without him. Now when Kanmakan heard these words, he cried out, saying, O villain, this, I bestride, is the steed whereof ye speak, and after which ye seek. And ye would do battle with me for his sake. So come out against me, all of you at once, and do your durest for the nuns. Then he shouted between the ears of Al-Katul, who ran at them like a ghoul, whereupon Kanmakan let drive at the Turk, and ran him through the body, and threw him from his horse, and let cut his life. After which he turned upon a second, and the third, and a fourth, and also of life bereft them. When the slaves saw this, they were afraid of him, and he cried out and said to them, Ho, sons of whores, drive out the cattle and the stud, or I will dye my spear in your blood. So they untethered the beasts and began to drive them out. And Sabah came down to Kanmakan with loud voicing and hugely rejoicing, when lo, there arose a cloud of dust. Excuse me. Sorry, I needed the tissue. Oh, where were we? When lo, there arose a cloud of dust, and grew till it walled the view, and there appeared under of it riders 100, like lions 100. Upon this, Sabah took flight, and fled to the hill's topmost height, leaving the assailable side, and enjoyed sight of the fight, saying, I am no warrior, but in sport and jest I delight. Then the 100 cavaliers made towards Kanmakan and surrounded him on all sides. And one of them accosted him, saying, Whither goest thou with this loot? Quoth he, I have made it my prize, and am carrying it away. And I forbid you from it, or come on to the combat, for know ye that he who is before you is a terrible lion, and an honourable champion, and a sword that cutteth wherever it turneth. When the horseman heard these words, he looked at Kanmakan and saw that he was a knight like a mane-clad lion in might, whilst his face was as the full moon rising on its 14th night, and valour shone from between his eyes. Now that horseman was the captain of the 100 horse, and his name was Kardash. And when he saw in Kanmakan the perfection of cavalrys with surpassing gifts of comeliness. His beauty reminded him of a beautiful mistress of his whose name was Fatin. Now she was one of the fairest of women in face, for Allah had given her charms and grace, and noble qualities of all kinds, such as tongue faileth to explain, and which ravished the hearts of man. Moreover, the cavaliers of the tribe feared her prowess, and all the champions of that land stood in awe of her high spirit. And she had sworn that she would not marry, nor let any possess her, except he should conquer her in combat, Kardash being one of her suitors. And she said to her father, "None shall approach me save he be able to deal me overthrow in the field, and instead of war thrust and blow." Now when the news reached Kardash, he scorned to fight with a girl, fearing reproach. And one of his intimates said to him, "Thou art complete in all conditions of beauty and goodliness. So if thou contend with her, even though she be stronger than thou must needs overcome her. For when she seeth thy beauty and grace, she will be discomfited before thee, and yield thee the victory. For verily women have a need of man's, even as thou heedest full plain." Nevertheless, Kardash refused and would not contend with her, and he ceased not to abstain from her thus, till he met from Kanmakan that which hath been set down. Now he took the prince for his beloved Fatin, and was afraid, albeit indeed she loved him for what she had heard of his beauty and valour. So he went up to him and said, "Woe to thee, O Fatin! Thou comest here to show me thy prowess, but now alight from thy steed, that I may talk with thee, for I have lifted these cattle, and have foiled my friends, and waylaid many a brave and man of knightly race, all for the sake of thy beauty of form and face, which are without peer. So marry me now, that king's daughters may serve thee, and thou shalt become queen of these countries." When Kanmakan heard these words, the fires of wrath flamed up in him, and he cried out, "Woe to thee, O Persian dog! Leave Fatin and thy trust and mistrust, and come to cut and thrust, for eftsoon thou shalt lie in the dust." And so saying, he began to wheel about him and assail him, and feel the way to prevail. But when Kardash observed him closely, he knew him for a doughty knight, and a stalwart in fight. And the error of his thought became manifest to him, when as he saw the green down of his cheeks dispread, like myrtle springing from the heart of a rose bright red. And he feared his onslaught, and quoth he to those with him, "Woe to you! Let one of you charge down upon him, and show him the keen sword and the quivering spear, for know that when many do battle with one man, it is foul shame, even though he be a kemperly white, and an invisible knight." Upon this there ran at Kanmakan a horseman like a lion in fight, mounted on a black horse with hoofs snow white, and a star on his forehead the bigness of a dirham, astounding wit and sign, as he were Abjah, which was Antar's destrier, even as saith of him the poet. The courser chargeth on battling foe, mixing heaven on high with the earth down low, as though the morning had blazed his brow, and he rends her vitals as quid pro quo. He rushed upon Kanmakan, and they wheeled about a while, giving blows and taking blows, such as confound the sprite and dim the sight. But Kanmakan was the first to smite the foe a swashing blow that rove through turban and iron skull cap, and reached his head, and he fell from his steed with the fall of a camel when he rolleth over. Then a second came out to him, and offered battle, and in like guise a third, a fourth, and a fifth, and he did with them all as he had done with the first. Thereupon the rest at once rushed upon him, for indeed they were roused by rage and wild with wrath. But it was not long before he had pierced them all with the point of his spear. When Kardash saw these feats of arms, he feared death. For he knew that the youth was stoutest of heart, and concluded that he was unique among knights and braves, and he said to Kanmakan, I waive my claim to thy blood, and I pardon thee the blood of my comrade. So take what thou wilt of the cattle, and wend thy ways, for thy firmness in fight moveth my ruth, and life is better for thee than death. Replied Kanmakan, thou lackest not of the generosity of the noble. But leave this talk, and run for thy life, and reck not of blame, nor think to get back the booty, but take the straight path for thine own safety. Thereupon Kardash waxed exceeding wroth, and rage moved him to the cause of his death. So he said to Kanmakan, woe to thee, and thou knew who I be, thou wouldst not wield these words in the open field. I am the lion to bash known as Kardash, he who spoileth great kings, and waylayeth all travellings, and seetheth the merchants' preciousest things. And the steed under thee is that I am seeking, and I call upon thee to tell me how thou camest by him, and hast him in thy keeping. Replied Kanmakan, know thou that this steed was being carried to my uncle King Sasan, under the escort of an ancient dame, high in rank, attended by 10 slaves. When thou fellest upon her, and tookest the horse from her, and I have a debt of blood against this old woman, for the sake of my grandfather King Omar bin al-Numan, and my uncle King Shahkan. Woe to thee, quoth Kardash, who is thy father, or thou that hast no lawful mother? Quoth he, know that I am Kanmakan, bin Zaw al-Makan, son of Omar bin al-Numan. But when Kardash heard this address, he said, thy perfection cannot be denied, nor yet the union in thee of knightly virtue and seemly head. And he added, fare in peace, for thy father showed us favour. Rejoined Kanmakan, by Allah, I will not deign to honour thee, or wretch I disdain, so far as to overcome thee in battle plain. Upon this, the Badawi waxed wroth, and they drove at each other, shouting aloud, whilst their horses pricked their ears and raised their tails. And they ceased not clashing together with such a crash that it seemed to each as if the firmament was split in sunder, and they continued to strive like 2 rams which butt, smiting and exchanging with their spears, thrust and cut. Presently Kardash foined at Kanmakan, but he evaded it and rejoined upon him, and so pierced him through the breast, that the spear had issued from his back. Then he collected the horses and the plunder, and he cried out to the slaves, saying, up, and be driving as hard as ye may. Hearing this, down came Sabah, and accosting Kanmakan, said to him, right well hast thou died, O knight of the age. Verily I prayed Allah for thee, and the Lord heard my prayer. Then he cut off Kardash's head. And Kanmakan laughed and said, woe to thee, O Sabah. I thought your rider fain of fight. Quoth the Badawi, forget not thy slave in the division of the spoil, so haply therewith I may marry my cousin Najma. Answered Kanmakan, Thou shalt assuredly share in it, but now keep watch over the booty and the slaves." Then he set out for his home, and he ceased not journeying night and day till he drew near Baghdad. And all the troops heard of Kanmakan and saw what was his of loot and cattle, and the horse thief's head on the point of Sabah's spear. Also, for he was a noted highwayman, the merchants knew Kardash's head, and rejoicing, Allah hath rid mankind of him. And they marvelled at his being slain and blessed his slayer. Thereupon all the people of Baghdad came to Kanmakan, seeking to know what adventures had befallen him. And he told them what had passed, whereupon all men were taken with awe of him, and the knights and champions feared him. Then he drove his spoil under the palace walls, and planting the spear heel, on whose point was Kardash's head, over against the royal gate, gave largesse to the people of Baghdad, distributing horses and camels, so that all loved him and their hearts inclined to him. Presently he took Sabah and lodged him in a spacious dwelling, and gave him a share of the loot, after which he went in to his mother and told her all that had befallen him in his last journey. Meanwhile, the news of him reached the king, who rose from his levee and, shutting himself up with his chief officers, said to them, "Know ye that I desire to reveal to you my secret and acquaint you with the hidden facts of my case. And further, know that Kanmakan will be the cause of our being uprooted from this kingdom, our birthplace. For he hath slain Kardash, albeit he had with him the tribes of the Kurds and the Turks. And our affair with him will end in our destruction, seeing that the most part of the troops are his kinsmen, and ye weet what the Vizier Dandan hath done, how he disowneth me after all I have shown him and favours, and after being faithful he hath turned traitor. Indeed, it hath reached me that he hath levied an army in the provinces, and entering and buffeting Sasan, who was suffering the agonies of the dying." So he arose and went up to the pavilion and noted what was therein, after which he returned to his palace, and sitting down to the preferred victual, ate what sufficed him and put the rest in his wallet. Then he took seat in his own place, and ceased not sitting till it was dark night, and the youth whose guest he was slept, when he rose and repaired to the pavilion wherein Sasan was confined. Now about it were dogs guarding it, and one of them sprang at him. So he took out of his budget a bit of meat and threw it to him. He ceased not casting flesh to the dogs till he came to the pavilion, and, making his way to where King Sasan was, laid his hand upon his head. Whereupon he said in a loud voice, "Who art thou?" He replied, "I am Kanmakan, whom thou stravest to kill. But Allah made thee fall into thine evil device. Did it not suffice thee to take my kingdom and the kingdom of my father, but thou must propose to slay me?" And Sasan swore a false oath, that he had not plotted his death, and that the brute was untrue. So Kanmakan forgave him and said to him, "Follow me." Quoth he, "I cannot walk a single step for weakness." Quoth Kanmakan, "If the case be thus, we will get us 2 horses and ride forth, I and thou, and seek the open." So he did as he said, and he took horse with Sasan and rode till daybreak, when they prayed the dawn prayer, and fared on, and ceased not faring till they came to a garden, where they sat down and talked. Then Kanmakan rose to Sasan and said, "Is aught left to set thy heart against me?" "No, by Allah," replied Sasan. So they agreed to return to Baghdad, and Sabah the Badawi said, "I will go before you. to give folk the fair tidings of your coming." Then he rode on in advance, acquainting women and men with the good news. So all the people came out to meet Kanmakan with tabrets and pipes, and Kuzia Fakan also came out, like the full moon, shining in all her splendor of light through the thick darkness of the night. So Kanmakan met her, and soul yearned the soul, and body longed for body. There was no talk among the people of the time but of Kanmakan, for the knights bore witness of him that he was the most valiant of the folk of the age, and said, "It is not right that other than Kanmakan should be our sultan. But the throne of his grandfather shall revert to him as it began." Meanwhile Sasan went in to his wife Nuzhat al-Zaman, who said to him, "I hear that the folk talk of nothing but Kanmakan, and attribute to him such qualities as tongue never can." He replied, "Hearing of a man is not like seeing a man. I have seen him, but have noted in him none of the attributes of perfection. Not all that is heard is said, but folk ape one another in extolling and cherishing him, and Allah maketh his praises to run off the lips of man, so that there incline to him the hearts of the people of Baghdad and of the Vizier Dandan, that perfidious and treacherous man, who hath levied troops from all lands and taketh to himself the right of naming a king of the country, and who chooseth that it shall be under the hand of an orphan ruler whose worth is naught." Asked Nuzhat al-Zaman, "What then is it that thou purposest to do?" And the king answered, "I mean to kill him, that the vizier may be balked of his intent, and return to his allegiance, seeing nothing for it but my service." Quoth she, "In good sooth, perfidy with strangers is a foul thing, and how much more with kith and kin. The righteous deed to do would be to marry him to thy daughter Kuzia Fakan, and give heed to what was said of all times, and fate some persons establish over thy head, and thou, being worthier her choice, upbraid. Yet do him honour due to his estate, he'll bring thee weal, though far or near thou vade. Nor speak thy thought of him, else shalt thou be of those who self degrade from honour's grade. Many harems are lovelier than the bride, but time and fortune lent the bride their aid." When Sasan heard these words, and comprehended what her verses intended, he rose from her in anger and said, "Were it not that thy death would bring on me dishonour and disgrace, I would take off thy head with my blade and make an end to thy breath." Quoth she, "Why art thou wroth with me? I did but jest with thee." Then she rose to him and bussed his head and hands, saying, "Right is thy foresight, and I and thou will cast about for some means to kill him forthright." When he heard this, he was glad and said, "Make haste and contrive some deceit to relieve me of my grieving, for in my sooth the door of device is straitened upon me." Replied she, "At once I will devise for thee to do away his life." "How so?" asked he. And she answered, "By means of our female slave, the so-called Bakun." Now this Bakun was past mistress in all kinds of knavery, and was one of the most pestilent of all women, in whose religion to abstain from wickedness was not lawful. She had brought up Kuzia Fakan and Kanmakan, who had her in so great affection that he used to sleep at her feet. So when King Sasan heard his wife name her, he said, "Right is this recking," and sending for the old woman, told her what had passed and bade her cast about to kill Kanmakan, promising her all goods. Replied she, thy bidding shall be obeyed, but I would have thee, O my lord, give me a dagger which hath been tempered in water of death, that I may dispatch him the speedilier for thee. Quoth Sasan, and welcome to thee, and gave her a hanger that would advance man's destiny. Now this slave woman had heard stories and verses, and had learned by rote great store of strange sayings and anecdotes. So she took the dagger and went out of the room, considering how she could compass his doom. Then she repaired to Kanmakan, who was sitting and awaiting news of Tryst with the daughter of his uncle Kuzia Fakan. So that night his thought was taken up with her, and the fires of love for her raged in his heart. And while he was thus, behold, the slave woman Bakun went in to him and said, union time is at hand, and the days of this union are over and gone. Now when he heard this, he asked, How is it with Kuzia Fakan? And Bakun answered, know that her time is wholly taken up with love of thee. At this he rose, and doffing his outer clothes, put them on her, and promised her all good. Then said she, know that I mean to pass this night with thee, that I may tell thee what talk I have heard, and console thee with stories of many passion distraught, whom love hath made sick. Nay, quoth he, rather tell me a tale that will gladden my heart, and gar my cares depart. With joy and goodwill, answered she. Then she took seat by his side, and that poniard under her dress, and began to say, know thou that the pleasantest thing my ears ever heard was the tale of the hashish eater. A certain man loved fair women, and spent his substance on them till he became so poor that nothing remained to him. The world was straitened upon him, and he used to go about the market streets begging his daily bread. Once upon a time, as he went along, behold, a bit of iron nail pierced his finger and drew blood. So he sat down, and wiping away the blood, bound up his finger. Then he arose, crying out, and fared forwards till he came to a hammam, and entering, took off his clothes. And when he looked about him, he found it clean and empty. So he sat him down by the fountain basin, and ceased not pouring water on his head till he was tired. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Oh my God, you really stuck with me. How cute is that? Thank you so much. I have no clue how long I read. I know it was a long story. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. So did I. Oops. Just a bit crispy now from this. Wherever you are in the world, wishing you a good day, a good evening, a good afternoon, or a good night. Please tune in tomorrow, if tomorrow is Friday. We are reading 4 nights a week, so it's Tuesday to Friday. Tune in tomorrow to keep hearing the story of, what was it, the hashish eater? How funny is that? Wait, the tale of the hashish eater will be continued tomorrow. Hey Anita! Thank you for taking so much time. I thought you said thank you for talking so much. An hour? Oh wow. Ooh! I deserve some water. Anyways, I wish you a blessed day, a blessed night. As usual, remember to go inwards and outward instead of outwards. Be grateful, be kind, be loving, and enjoy life. I'll see you next Tuesday, everyone. Thanks a lot. Bye.